Boys and girls, we are looking at the grenade launcher Anarchy. This is the new raid exotic, and it comes with the intrinsic perk arc traps. Grenades stick to surfaces and chain arc bolts to other mines. Now you probably noticed that those grenades look just like the trip mines that the Fallen leave behind, right? Same concept here, but instead of like a trip mine explosion, it's arc damage. Now let's talk about this weapon, guys. What is its main function, how it performs in both PvP and in PvE, and is this exotic worth grinding for? First up, let's talk about PvP. I didn't really care for it, guys. There's some fun stuff to it in terms of like zoning off an area. Say you want to go ahead and set up trip mines around a power slot to catch the next enemy that tries to push that power. I can also see it being somewhat useful for something like Countdown. Can you imagine placing a lot of arc traps around the bomb after it's armed? But for the most part, players in PvP will just shoot the mines. Now the mine has two different characteristics. Number one, the arc trap when you first shoot it is obviously not activated. It's just got that blue line going across, and it's just a solid visible blue line. And this trap actually will last for like 20-25 seconds, like a really long time. But once it becomes activated, it'll actually do its pulse damage for about 11.5 seconds. Now the damage itself doesn't one-hit kill in PvP. It hits the target for 135 damage, so it actually has to hit them twice. So if you're going up against enemies that know how to move and move quick, they'll actually run through the trap, arm it, take 135 damage, and then they just keep booking it. And now your arc trap is just going to pulsate for the next 10 seconds and blow up. And considering how visible it is during this process, it's very unlikely that another enemy is going to run into that trap. The other thing I didn't like is that when you die after you've placed your traps, all of your traps explode. So overall, guys, I do not think this is going to be a weapon you would use for PvP. You can place the trap directly on an enemy, and it does come with the trait there, moving target, that might aid you in that, as well as high velocity rounds to help get that grenade to your enemy. But the grenade itself only does 11 impact damage and then pulses for 35. So if a guy is running at you with a shotgun, they have nothing to fear if you hit them with this grenade launcher. Sure, they're gonna die, but they can still take you down with them. Now the fun factor to this is you could possibly stick a guy, wait for him to run amongst his teammates, and then throw another grenade charge down somewhere around them, and he'll sit there and pulsate them all and probably kill all of them. Unfortunately, I didn't get that scenario to happen for me, but it is a possible scenario. Overall, this is not a PvP weapon. You can use it for fun, but I definitely would not recommend it for things like competitive. Now for PvE, what is its purpose? Damage wise to bosses, this weapon kinda holds itself back. As in, one shot here on Greg does 786 per damage tick, which again is about 11.5 seconds in which it's doing damage, as well as the initial impact of the grenade itself. But when we place two of these grenades on Greg, you see the damage there doubles, hitting for 1,571 per tick. This really got me excited, because I thought essentially if I put 3 grenades on it, we're obviously going to be tripling our damage. Unfortunately, this is not the case. More arc traps do not mean more damage. No, its main utility here is just to create these arc traps all around the enemy, and it doesn't necessarily increase the damage, it just simply maintains damage wherever the enemy is going to walk. Which really defeats the purpose, because if you wanted to maintain damage, you would just directly impact the enemy to begin with. It places the arc traps on them, and it will do its full amount of damage regardless of wherever they may walk. I guess the only upside of this is if you wanted to hit them as well as anything around the boss. So if there's like a lot of majors, maybe something like Gambit, and you wanted to collectively do damage to everything, then yes, you can definitely do that here with Anarchy. But the main selling point for this weapon is really for things like a horde mode. So something like Escalation Protocol, or maybe even the new Forges. Placing these traps down and letting it kill enemies as they walk into them. That's about the only selling point. And it does do a lot of damage here, right? A lot of these majors that are trying to walk through this line, they get stunned back, it hits them again, and it kills them. And it pretty much will keep anything from touching you. And you don't really have to expend a lot of ammo for this. Literally 2 arc traps put down is plenty of damage to be putting into an enemy. And as long as you place yourself well, your enemies will always have to walk through those arc traps if they are trying to get to you. That is, of course, if the enemies aren't trying to melee you. If they're just trying to shoot you, then obviously they're probably not going to walk into this trap. So with all that being said, is Anarchy worth the grind? Is it something that we could compare to 1000 Voices? Not for me, it isn't, guys. For me, my power weapon is always my heaviest dealing damage weapon. Whether it's Spindle, whether it's 1K Voices, Sleeper, I always save my power weapon for whatever it is that I need to beef down. I've got things like Breakneck, Loaded Question, plenty of other options out there that can easily dismantle ads, all of which can have a major spec thrown on it too to do more damage to majors. Anarchy is a really fun looking weapon. It's cool to actually be on the other end of these trip mines being placed, but it's not one I think many of us are going to utilize. Not yet. Surprisingly, the best place that this weapon would have served is actually for the Omnigal Strike. Considering how many ads actually spawn and you need to just zone yourself off so you can continually do damage to Omnigal. Some of my OG players are in here. You know what I'm talking about. Placing those arc traps around Omnigal to constantly be doing damage to her as well as keeping your back safe. This would have been a perfect weapon for that scenario. So if you think of Destiny 2 and you're thinking of what scenario would be best for this weapon, that's the scenario you should be looking for. For my PvP players though, Anarchy is definitely not the weapon for you. So many other options that are better options than this. Well, that is your Anarchy grenade launcher review. Shout out to Evil on Xbox. He was the only one I have been able to find that actually has this grenade launcher. Much love to him for letting us get on his account. He was an absolute boss and I very much appreciate it. I've got some other forged weapons as well as raid weapons we're going to be covering. I wish I could have covered them yesterday, but we had the Anthem Alpha going on, of which I wanted to talk about in a little more depth, but the NDA is pretty strict. We actually saw a streamer yesterday get shut down and banned live, which he should have not been streaming the alpha to begin with, so he kind of deserves it. But anyways, regardless, until that NDA is lifted, I will not be able to talk a lot about the alpha in depth, and it's killing me. God, it's killing me. So fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.